Along with every other news organisation, we quite often report on the impact of climate change. And perhaps for some of us, there is a sense that, yes, it's bad, but humankind is responding and the worst can be averted. But those of you who really know this subject will need no convincing of just how fundamental this threat really is to every last one of us. So, over the coming months, we are going to try to explore the reality in a methodical way. We begin with deforestation, partly because the World Wildlife Fund says that it could cause as much damage as all forms of transport the world over. So tonight, to kick off Earth on the Edge, we report from Ghana in West Africa on how the disappearing forests have left the poor struggling to survive. Closer to home in Ukraine, Juliet finds that Europe's love affair with cheap furniture is making attempts to curb illegal logging all but impossible. But our first report is from inside Colombia on the rapid disappearance of its rainforest, from a part of the country, in fact, that was inaccessible until recently on account of the country's long civil war.
The Amazon rainforest is much more than just a jungle. Its giant trees store 20% of the carbon on Earth. Their leaves evaporate trillions of tons of water a year. In doing so, the Amazon cools a warming planet. The forest sustains and is sustained by countless fungi, plants and animals. Humble termites produce the soil, insects pollinate the plants on which other animals depend. The view from the understory makes the reality of deforestation all the more brutal. This is the same piece of forest seen from the air. It's being felled for the supposed benefit of one species alone, us. Marco Aurelio ZAPATA moved here in the 1970s, but it's only in the last few months that he's witnessed the clear cutting of forests surrounding his 220 hectares.
En ese tiempo era selva, el 99% era selva. Pues es un sentimiento, como se dice, negativo, porque uno quisiera que no se dañara tanto la naturaleza.
The forest around frontier towns like Calamar was protected by Colombia's FARC rebels during their decades-long war with the government. It concealed the cocaine trade, which financed their operations. But FARC has now been disbanded. The new organised crime is grabbing land inaccessible for decades. The end of one conflict has created a new war on trees. It's still too dangerous to travel into the forest by river or road, but flying over it is to witness its destruction. The main purpose of felling is to lay claim to land, to be converted later into cattle ranches. But this couldn't be happening in a worse place. It's on the edge of one of the most pristine parts of the Amazon. So right below us is a piece of freshly deforested land right on the edge of the national park. This is how deforestation happens. It's in patches, in fragments. But ultimately this vast forest is rapidly disappearing. And will this be next? The jewel in the crown of Colombia's Amazon forest. The Chiribiquete National Park. It's pristine, protected rainforest and forbidden to visit. But we've joined conservation charity WWF on a rare opportunity to fly over it.
It's completely breathtaking, the scale of this forest and its importance. Here in the Colombian Amazon, we know how critical the role of our forests are, but so much deforestation is quite literally hidden from view, it's below the canopy, and how we work now to save it is ever more important.
Today sees the publication of WWF's Below the Canopy report, revealing declines of more than 50% in tropical forest animals worldwide. Alarmingly, the losses aren't just linked to deforestation. Climate change and illegal hunting are destroying these ecosystems, driving extinction even where trees remain. It's a vicious cycle, putting the forests on which we all depend at global crisis point, and nowhere more so than in the Amazon. Tom Clark, News at 10, Colombia.
Well, after that, you may be tempted to think that, yes, deforestation is a serious but far-flung crisis, but this is simply not true. On the edge of the EU, huge sections of forest in Ukraine are being cut down to meet our desire for cheap wood, for furniture, DIY and building. The vast majority of Ukrainian wood ends up in the EU, and 40% of it is from illegally felled trees.
High in the Carpathian Mountains, the forests are being felled to feed Europe's ferocious appetite for cheap wood. Ukraine is battling systematic corruption that's threatening to destroy this ancient expanse of forest. We were driven up to see this logging by one of the men brought in to clean up the country's timber trade.
Боротьба з незаконними рубками – це наша першочергова задача. Це основна робота лісової охорони.
These trees have been legally cut, but an investigation by a British environmental group found the system is often abused. All timber should have an official stamp punched into the trunk. We watched as legal documents were given to the driver, but were told officials are frequently bribed to provide false papers.
Nearly 70% of the wood that we're seeing here is exported to the EU. It's estimated that 40% of that is illegally cut.
The rewards are huge. European sales are worth around £1 billion a year. In Britain, it's used to make everything from furniture to floorboards to garden fences. Even in the protected national parks, the argument over who controls the forests is raging.
Well, can somebody tell me what's happening?
We enter Gultsushina with national park officers, but are stopped. The man shouting is the mayor. He insists the land belongs to the local community, who should be able to log it. Documents are produced but dismissed by the national park, who claim the activities are illegal.
You are all Ukrainians. Yeah? So why don't you all protect the forest?
Divisions are deep. No one will compromise. Caught in the middle of this heated national debate, a small, underfunded charity. DMYTRO and his Forest Watch team are looking for evidence of trees that have been illegally cut down, so the culprits can be prosecuted.
This is quite recent, so it's like last week. And here, the first thing, I would say this is illegally cut because the stamp is too low.
Large trees like this could earn illegal loggers up to €200. Convictions are rare and they're willing to take the risk. Efforts to inspect the forest are often met with hostility. When DMYTRO arrived with a forest official last year to record illegally logged sites, the bridge was blocked. The men forcing them to turn back. On another occasion, the campaigners locked themselves in the car, trapped by an angry mob. We returned to the same community. A forestry worker agreed to help us find the illegal loggers if we concealed his identity. Heading up the mountain, we pretend to be hikers with our cameras hidden. We glimpse a truck coming towards us. Carrying a full load of logs, this is the first sign we're on the right road. Round the next bend, we found the evidence of mass clearance. Large scars on the hillside. In Ukraine, they call them clear cuts.
That's a huge clear cut, and that's a fresh one, probably they're operating here.
The drone captures just how much of the mountain previously covered with fir and pine now lies bare. On the way out of the village that evening, we passed dozens of trucks, all heavily laden with their lucrative cargo. Sawmills are everywhere. We counted 10 in one small community. They're only allowed to buy wood with official tags. Vitaly takes me to show me they're complying. A quick check shows how easy it is to break the law.
Here, just round the back of the sawmill, these logs don't appear to have any of the black tags attached to them.
We checked both ends before going back to confront Vitaly.
One has the black sticker, one has not. Why?
He shrugs, claiming the illegal pile of wood doesn't belong to him.
Yeah?
The Ukrainian government wants to crack down on illegal logging, but there are few signs of that right now. The desecrated landscape we witnessed, a reminder of just how much harm the EU's consumption of cheap wood is causing on its own doorstep. Juliet Bremner, News at 10, Ukraine.
So if all that leaves us in no doubt of the scale of the crisis and its proximity to our own consumption and taste, Penny has our final report tonight from Ghana on what deforestation really means for people whose survival is on thin margins at the best of times, where the trees have gone, the soil is poor or virtually non-existent. Desert conditions have taken hold, which is of course extremely problematic for both food and water. Life is incredibly hard, but a fight back is on. Ghana is part of a multinational scheme in Africa to plant a 5,000-mile-wide wall of trees across the width of the entire continent.
It shouldn't be like this. It's the rainy season, but in northern Ghana the rivers are running dry. To find water, Festina Benasco has to dig a riverbed choked with sand. And with very few trees left to protect the soil, the fields around her home are turning to desert. Festina's as exhausted as the land she's trying to live off. 6 years ago, she tells me, she could grow enough food for her family, but not anymore. Now the temperatures are rising and the soil, she tells me, has turned to dust. 2/3 of Ghanaians live off the land, or try to. And the birth rate's high and rising, adding to the pressure. The landscape's been largely stripped of trees, cut down for firewood or to plant crops which quickly deplete the soil. You have to be old to remember when the land was on your side here. Chief Adusi has 10 great-grandchildren and worries their lives will be harder than his was. His son, Maboli Agarugo, showed me fields they've had to abandon.
What used to be on this land?
A
farm was here.
Tree by tree, field by field, a slow-motion natural disaster is unfolding. In Gorogo village, everyone's felt the impact. Philomena Azuri says they're all struggling to grow enough food.
When you farm, you won't get any food unless you go and buy. We are buying.
But in some places, something is being done to halt the environmental damage. In this eastern region of Lolido, one community is planting thousands of trees donated by a British charity. It's a race against time to save their land and their water supply.
We are planting the trees to protect the River Dakar, because trees means life in Africa. So planting over 1 million number of trees will help the people break the cycle of poverty.
This project's part of an international initiative to plant hundreds of millions of trees in some of the poorest places on Earth. Dubbed the Great Green Wall of Africa, this is on the front line of the fight to halt climate change. The trees will help communities locally and the planet globally.
It's a hugely ambitious project spanning the width of Africa. For environmentalists in the West, it may be a distant cause to support, but for the people here, it's a necessity to live.
And not just to survive, but to thrive. These women are making a sustainable living from the fruit of shea trees, turning them into shea butter to sell. The trees now provide both environmental protection and a way to earn a living. Bernadetta AURELIO explained that she now has enough money to buy both food and school equipment for her 7 children. The women of Paga have found a way to live in harmony with their environment, but millions of others have not, and they're now trapped in a cycle of poverty, trying to live off land that can no longer support them. Penny Marshall, News at 10, Northern Ghana.
OK, well, for an expert's view on deforestation and its effects, we turn to the naturalist Dame Jane Goodall, whose pioneering work with apes changed the way we understand animals and their habitat, and indeed how we think about ourselves. She began her work in Tanzania in the 1960s, where she studied the behaviour of chimpanzees, becoming the first and indeed only human to be accepted into their society. These early studies were the beginning of her lifelong campaign for animal and human conservation. So when I spoke to Dame Jane in Tanzania earlier, I put it to her that a lot of people accept that climate change is an issue, but believe the world is gradually solving it. So how would she describe the scale of the crisis?
I would say that the crisis is upon us, that it's one of the biggest challenges that we have to face, and that's growing all the time as we see increased melting of the Arctic ice and the glaciers, and sea levels are rising, and we are releasing more and more carbon dioxide by burning fossil fuels and through industrial agriculture. And this is also releasing large amounts of methane and nitrous oxide. So all of these things are really conspiring to, we should be confronting this as one of the greatest environmental emergencies of the last 100 years.
What do you make of the quality of global leadership on this issue? I'm thinking particularly from the White House at the moment.
We're seeing leaders who always put economic development before saving the environment. So that's money in the pocket now. It's economic development to benefit the governments and the wealthy. And unfortunately, this is basically stealing the future for our children, as well as destroying ecosystems. I mean, look what's happening in Brazil. They say the rate of deforestation there is greater than it's ever been, and the Amazon rainforest, this great center of biodiversity, along with the forests of the Congo, they're disappearing as the leaders of the countries seek economic gain.
For those people watching this at home who are concerned, who are worried and are seeking to amend, as far as we all can, our own personal behaviour to reduce the impact, particularly on deforestation, what would you advise all of us really to concentrate on doing?
The answer here is that if we all make ethical choices, even small ones, what we buy, what we wear, where did it come from, did it harm the environment, then millions and hopefully billions of even small ethical choices will make a difference. And there are some people, CEOs of major corporations, and they are beginning to change. We can help them change because wealthier customers, if they don't like the way the company produces food or clothing or whatever it is, they mustn't buy it. And that is pushing big corporations to do things differently and in greater harmony with the environment. So every single one of us can make a difference every single day.